Okay, good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Talmor. Thank you for coming to this meeting today in the series on holistic wellness. I'll be talking about a very important subject, the fundamental item in all creations and the building stone of everything that we have in us and around us. First, let's talk about the physical universe. We all know that it's made from atoms. Now, this is a picture of atom done through laser light. This is a hydrogen atom. This is the old model of the atom where they're telling us that the electrons are flying around the nucleus and there's some kind of either layers or some trajectory, or they're just cloud of electrons around the nucleus. This is other illustration of the electrons running in trajectories, and supposedly when the electrons move from one layer to another, they release energy in the form of photon. Today, actually, there is new research that shows totally different paradigm in how the atom is made, and this is really most fascinating. According to this research, all atoms are built from building blocks that are the 5 solids of Plato, all this geometrical form. I won't get into any details, but you can research it yourself. This is, for example, the silica atom. So actually each layer in the conventional old model is a geometrical structure that you can enclose in a sphere. If you want to do your own investigation, there is a website here, and you can find a lot of information on the internet. Some of the research that corroborate this new model is done by Dan Shechtman, which is a professor of chemistry. He did his research 23 years ago at the University of Iowa, but only 23 years later, I believe, he got a Nobel Prize, because the significance of his research is, it's amazing. It's actually revolutionary. And if you also check the work of Roger Penrose, that is a distinguished professor of mathematics in England, he has a whole theory about the black hole. It's very interesting because, just to whet your appetite, in a way the atom, the new research shows that the atom is a much more complex entity. It's made from different energetic geometrical layers rather than atomic layers, and actually it's connected to a different dimension. So I'll just tell you something that you may not have heard, but you can explore it yourself. I'll give you the references. More than our physical dimension. Our physical dimension, we have 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. In the other dimension, we have 3 dimensions of time and 1 dimension of space. So that's actually the dimension that you go in your dreams or when you pass on. It's fascinating because also that explains the possibility of free energy and so forth and consciousness. Actually, the conclusion of Roger Penrose's ideas is there is a connection between the atom, consciousness, and the physical universe. So it's absolutely a fascinating subject, and if you're interested, I'll encourage you. You see some links here that you can follow. One of the implications of this model is described by David Wilcox, which did a lot of research about the science today that actually corroborate all these ideas and connection between atom consciousness and so forth, which we'll touch a little bit indirectly in our discussion. So if you never heard about it, this is probably one of the most fascinating subject, which if you're interested, you may do your own search and find out more about it. If you look at every atom, it's basically a pulsating energy field, and obviously it's surrounded by energy fields, and itself is energy field. So every atom emits waves. This is why we can actually do spectrum analysis and find that each atom has certain matter, has different signature and so forth. So atom is basically unit of emitting wave and pulsating wave surrounded by waves. So the whole universe, this is a beautiful photo of the Milky Way. All the universe is actually energy and waves in motions. In physics, the definition of wave is disturbance or oscillation that travels through space and matter accompanied by transfer of energy. If you think about it, you realize that everything around us is energy. Now, in the environment, in the space around us, there are two kinds of waves. One wave is obviously created by nature, or which we call natural physics, and we have man-made waves that created by what we call man-made physics or artificial physics. When we go to nature, we're surrounded by natural-made waves or natural physics. So one distinction of these waves is that they all have vortex shapes, and you see it in the galaxies. You see in the shape of acorn, and everything around you, if you look, everything is vortex, from tornadoes to hurricanes to the shape of flowers and so forth. In contradiction, the man-made waves we define as artificial physics are all the waves created by man artificially are symmetrical waves. They could be sinus, square, triangle, etc. They have patterns which are identical and repeating themselves. Natural wave, cosmic rays that are coming to Earth from space, sunlight. Obviously, we have around us a lot of waves that we don't even define scientifically, but obviously we are in a universe of waves that are coming from all around us, which we'll cover more. Another example of wave, which is not actually defined by conventional science, but it's pretty obvious. If you imagine yourself going in a room that everybody is upset and angry, they don't have to say a word, but you won't feel comfortable. Your body actually can feel the waves, and we see later why. If you go to another room and everybody is happy and content, obviously you feel different feeling. Now the people don't have to say anything, but they obviously emanate some waves that affect your body, and you'll see how that happens. So that's another form of emanation of energy, in this case from the human body. But in essence, everything emanates energy, whether it's a living unit, biological unit, plant, animal, human, or even artificial or stone or any inanimate object. So more examples, lightning, obviously, it's a form of energetic wave. The weather that is formed from evaporating water, from warming oceans, from forests, vapor that come from forests and so forth. All these actually are created by energy exchange or energy interaction in nature, all obviously created from natural wave. If you look at biological system, and including natural non-living objects, they all transmit information. In the biological system, the exchange of information allows the function of the body, and in the inanimate kingdom, or the earth, minus all the living objects, this exchange of information allow the creation of rain, of soil, of oxygen, and all the elements and the infrastructure that without life is not possible. Victor Schomburger was a wonderful scientist, and if you haven't heard about him, you want to check him out. He created some amazing technologies based only on nature. He just mimicked nature rather than trying to reinvent the wheel like science today does. He does amazing things, including free energy devices, and he actually explains in details how everything in nature, the forests, the bushes, the roots of the trees, and so forth, create a living system that actually enables life to exist. He also, during the German time, he was Austrian. They say that he built anti-gravity devices, so-called UFO for the Germans. He actually was brought to the United States debriefed, and he was very hopeful, believing in coming to a wonderful country because he has a solution for free energy and all this good stuff, but to realize very quickly that nobody was really in the government was interested in free energy and all kind of wonderful natural things that can help humanity and improve humanity's quality of life, and he died broken heart. If you haven't heard about him, you want to check him out. I will talk about another phenomena. I call it modulating energy wave matrix, or some kind of natural matrix. Some people, David Wilcox, call it source field. If you read the book Field, Lynn McTaggart wrote a book reviewing all the scientific data that shows a lot of things that science doesn't tell you or doesn't admit to. One of them actually has shown that all your memory of the brain, all your knowledge, all your life experience is really not stored in your physical brain, but it stores in zero-point energy field, so-called zero-point. Some people call it other names, maybe Akashic record, and all the information that you ever learn and experience is not in your physical brain, but it's actually in zero-point, and your brain can retrieve the information. They showed it with experiments on animals, rats, that they destroy the brain, but they still retain learning abilities that they trained, even though all the areas that supposedly in the brain that given the skills are stored were totally destroyed. I'll give you some example just to give you a general idea. What is energy wave matrix? If you look at very simple thing like embryo, you start with 2 cells and then they multiply. At a certain stage there be, for example, let's say 128 cells exactly identical. All the DNA is identical. So how do you imagine that all this bunch of identical cells become such complicated, elaborate system of organs and tissues that is our body? Obviously, as we know today, the DNA is not a fixed molecule. It keeps changing and being modulated, and we'll talk about it a little later. And this modulation allows the cell, the function of the DNA and the DNA to change. So for example, the DNA of the liver is not the same the DNA of the spleen or bone marrow, because somehow the same DNA has been changed and it developed into different DNA in different cells and organs that create totally different material, different function. What explained that there is some kind of energy matrix or some kind of blueprint, obviously not in the physical universe, but in some kind of maybe 0 point, if you want to call it, that directs the embryo toward this kind of development. And that's maybe true for anything biological that grows from the seed of a plant or a tree that becomes a huge tree and have a potential to create a million other trees. If you think about it, there is something there that directs this development. It doesn't happen just by accident like the Big Bang, which is obviously, if you delve into this, all the scientific theories today with the new research show that they're actually laughable, like Penrose from England saying the same. So here, again, you see how from identical cell you have all this complex. That's example of source matrix. David Wilcox called source fields very interesting because you can explore it in his website and in his books. He actually collected a lot of science, including by people that were Nobel Prize, that actually shows that live matter and DNA can appear spontaneously. And there's actually many work that I've seen years ago that they done in the 19th century. But today, for example, he's talking about experiment where they took sealed glass tubes, totally sealed with some DNA. Then they connected them to other 5 glass tubes with only water. And they created some electric circuit with slow pulsation, and there was spontaneous formation of DNA molecules or pieces of DNA molecules in the tubes that are only water. And there's a lot of actually experiments that show that. If you want to check it out, you can do your own exploration. But it's very interesting because basically what it proves that matter can be created spontaneously from that matrix, even to the point that it can create molecules that didn't exist. Like you have DNA molecules, obviously you don't have carbon in the water, but it created carbon molecules and pieces of DNA in the sealed tubes. In summary, the natural energy around us enables the existence of biological life, existence of the infrastructure to support nature, but beyond that, it allows consciousness to create the physical universe or direct its evolution. I cover this in different lectures that I have posted on my website, and I can do more lectures that explain what is the connection logically between consciousness and the physical universe. But all this piece of data basically corroborate what I explained in the other lecture, and you can do your own research. What you have to understand that the natural wave around us, they're not just there by accident. They obviously keep changing 24 hours a day, the different kind of waves, and those waves modulate the energetic function of the body. It modulates the DNA. We know from Chinese medicine that different organs have maximal function different times of the day of the night according to the energy. And the natural wave not only regulate the organs, they actually regulate the DNA in the organ and allow it to function properly and harmoniously with each other. So everything in your body, the function, is dependent on the natural waves around us. When your body works optimally with this modulated properly by these waves, obviously your body is healthier, you have less stress, and you have better emotional, physical, and mental well-being. Also, because your body communicates with the universe on many, many levels, most of it subconscious. For some people it's more conscious. Example, telepathy, just to give you an example. Proper modulation of the body with natural wave allow consciousness the ability to receive information, communicate with the universe, and also adapt itself to the environment around it. See, the reason, for example, that if you go to the Himalayas and you go to 20,000 feet and try to run, you may get very sick. The local will run all day up and down the mountains. For you, it will take a while to get used to this environment, and the reason is that their DNA is modulated by this natural wave in this environment, and your DNA has to get adapted. So the adaptation to the environment is also another aspect of this concept. If they've come from the Himalaya to Florida, I'm sure they will not feel very good for a while until they get adapted. I want you to understand that everything is energy, everything information. This is, by the way, behind the concept that you want to drink local water, local food, because everything is energy and everything is information. Let's look at artificial wave, man-made waves. So we obviously in our environment, we have a lot of electromagnetic pollution. It will come from anything electrical, whether power lines, electric wires, anything plugged to electricity, creates low frequency, which is measured in milligauss or microtesla, the one that we have probably for 100 years now. And some people, like Dr. Shashua, correlates the increase of cancer, which is very interesting, to electricity, to the proliferation of electricity. When you take a graph, according to him, of death, the main causes for death in the beginning of last century, most of them were infection. If you look at the decrease in mortality from infection, it goes straight line way before, it goes down in straight line way before antibiotics were utilized and invented. But on the other hand, if you look the increase of cancer mortality, it goes the opposite way. If you average them, you have straight line. And he has very interesting theory, which actually he has proven in lab and by treating people and healing 100% AIDS and 80 or 90% of advanced cancer and restoring heart to people that are waiting for heart transplant. That's very, very interesting, because one of the reasons for the change in morbidity and mortality in the last 120 years is electricity. Another example, I had a very good friend, Phil Callahan, that was a scientist at UF, way probably 50 or 100 years ahead of his time. And years ago, before I was aware of this problem, he has actually an oscilloscope that can show artificial wave as natural wave, and actually showed me, this was in the 80s, that the high power lines affect you as much as 2 miles away, and the street power lines can affect you up to 400 yards. But he told me a very interesting story. In Germany, the last few villages in the remote mountains connected to the electrical grid was in 1934, with big fanfare. What they noticed, however, that within 3-4 years, these people that didn't know what is cancer and heart disease have the same rate of cancer or heart disease at the same as the rest of Germany, which is interesting and obviously not accidental. The other pollution type which becomes more and more prolific in the last 10 years, and unfortunately it's growing exponentially, is microwave or high radio frequency or radio frequency pollution, which comes from Wi-Fi, microwave transmission, cell phone towers, smart meters, etc., etc. The intensity of the radiation is measured by volts per square meter or microwatts per square meter. Other man-made pollution, which I'll talk later briefly, is obviously nuclear pollution. Keep Fukushima in mind because apparently we're not being told exactly how serious it is in the mainstream. And in Japan, any journalist that talks publicly or say anything about Fukushima actually can be arrested and put in prison. And you haven't heard that from the mainstream media. But it is important, and the problem is not only nuclear pollution in the form of radioactivity or radioactive elements, which we're all aware, but there's another type of pollution not recognized by conventional science yet, but it is the fact that when you break the atom, artificially, again, you, so to speak, destroying an energetic system, and it creates resonance in the ether, not measured by conventional science, but what it does, it actually blocks all our chakras, which modulates our endocrine system and our connection, talking about connecting to the universe with earth energy and with cosmic energy and information, earth information. And what happened is that if you are within 60 miles of atomic plant, you are affected by this energy. If you live within 60 miles from atomic plant or place where they have storing atomic warhead, you're affected by this pollution. When you look at population near atomic plants, and there's no radioactivity there, but you have much higher mortality. When they decommission atomic plants, they find that within few years the mortality was much, much decreased. That's interesting. And the reason I'm mentioning it because we do have technology, which I'll mention briefly if we have time, to mitigate this kind of pollution, including the effect of radiations like X-rays and radiation from radiation therapy. Another way which is very little known is compression of gases. See, when you compress gases, you create a resonance in the ether that affects the gasic phase in your body. There is an energetic function to those phases in your body. Obviously, we have liquid, gas, and solids in our body. And anything that compresses gases like refrigerator, flying, bariatric chamber, diving will create problem. The artificial compression of gases creates resonance that affects our nervous system, our DNA, and our bone marrow, and creates stress on your body. That's one of the reasons that flying is very stressful, and not only the radiation, high altitude, and other electromagnetic pollution inside the airplane, but also the compression of gases. Obviously, in total contradiction to natural wave, artificial man-made energetic pollution interferes with the natural energetic function of the body, interferes with the proper modulation of the DNA function, and doesn't allow your body and your organs to communicate, to function properly, and to adapt to the environment. It disturbs the function of the nervous system because the nervous system is one of the ways that your body communicate and connect everything together. That and the meridians, according to Chinese medicine. Obviously, this kind of pollution can also affect your nervous system, which obviously also aggravates your stress and emotional problems. And last but not least, it suppresses your communication and ability to receive information and communicate with the universe. Maybe I give you another example that make it clear. What do you mean by communicating with the universe? According to the theory that have been proven that Lynn McTaggart talks in her book, all the information in the universe, apparently also the information that created DNA, it's in a matrix. There is a template, energetic template, that all the information is stored. Our brain is really only connection device or reception and transmission device that gets this information. For example, if you are a great scientist, the knowledge is already there. It doesn't come from your physical brain, but you tune up to this knowledge and receive it. If you're wonderful artist, great artist, you have great art, but the inspiration, the information, the ideas, not necessarily consciously, of course, will come from the reception by your brain and by your body. That's actually how we get information. I'll give you another example to put it in perspective. If you look at traditional modalities of healing, whether it's shamanic medicine, even your grandmother medicine that you'd urban natural things that were from knowledge collected for probably thousands of years, whether it's Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, studies show that if you take for different diagnoses and treat them with allopathic conventional medicine or one of the system, they all come many, many folds more effective, safe, and I covered this in another lecture, but the point is that how all these people without electron microscope, computers, Wi-Fi, knowledge, so much knowledge, quotation mark, created this wonderful system of Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, which work wonderfully for many, many things, because they got this information through intuition. So they got the information from the universe and put it together. That's another example. And one of the downside of artificial energy is it actually blocks our consciousness and our awareness. And again, that's another part of a different lecture that they do on the effect of energy on consciousness and so forth. Let's talk about water. Obviously, water is essential for life and for the existence of the planet, which is the platform or without which life, physical life, cannot exist. If you look at any biological system, for example, our body, obviously it's a very, very complex, self-contained system that you can compare in a way to a computer because everything functions automatically. You don't have to wish your heart to work or your lung to breathe and all these complex communications so complicated that it's infinitesimally more complicated than your regular computer. If you look at a computer, what do you have? You have a hard drive or information system, you have software, obviously you have the electricity to run it. Obviously our electricity is the nervous system and the blood that charge the nervous system. And then you have the hard drive, which is the water. The DNA is actually the software, which can be modulated not only by nature, but also by your consciousness, your mind, your belief, nutrition. Check up epigenetics online, and there's wonderful movies, National Geographic, that explains what it is. Basically, the idea that DNA is not fixed like science some years ago used to believe. The water is the information system or the hard drive all biological systems are dependent on, and life is obviously impossible without it. So let's look why that is, why water is such essential. The water being the hard drive, and again, if you compare your hard drive, it has two parameters, two variables, 0 and 1, and they come with billions of combination to give you the information system and the function that you're familiar with your computer. And you can even operate machine, robots, etc., etc. Obviously, since if you take all the computers ever built, they're nothing compared to the complexity of your computer. Take all the supercomputer. Even though we're getting better, we're still far, far away. I'll just give you a clue, in my opinion, because we don't understand the effect of consciousness, which science started to wake up a little bit. When we look at the water molecule, just look at the old model because it's more simplistic. You have the nucleus and you have the electrons cloud running somewhere around it. And if you take the water molecule, obviously the water molecule is affected by energy, and its pulsating energy will be affected by the energy around it. So you have the angle between the two hydrogen and oxygen can change from 88 to 108 degrees. Obviously that variation, and then there is infinitesimal possibilities of the electron cloud to change. Because bear in mind that if you look at the proportion of the space inside of every atom, it's not like few inches from the center. It's actually several miles, or it will be similar to the distance between us and the sun. In this vast space inside the atom, you have infinitesimal possibilities, combination of trajectories or clouds, whatever you want to call them, which in nature, when you freeze water, you crystallize water, you get snowflakes. And we know that snowflakes are all It's not one and like because infinitesimal variation, which each variation is actually a piece of information. This kind of hard drive or information system obviously can satisfy natural living beings like humans, animals, and plants. Let me give you some other examples just to understand it better. We know from physics, for example, if you take certain color and project it in water and measure the water tension and the pH of the water before and after, you will see a distinctive change which will be typical to the color. So if you change color, you will change the pH and water tension after the water was irradiated. Those of you that know homeopathy, you know that we made homeopathy by diluting substances in water many times to the point that no molecules left of the substance, but the information was given to water, and then we put it onto pellets or tincture to stabilize it. And when you take homeopathy, there's really no molecules left, but it's only the energy which was fixed in water. So again, it's other examples of water retaining information or carrying information. Think about it. You know that your body is actually water system, 70 to 90% approximately, depending on your age, and everything is immersed in water between the cells, inside the cell, the DNA, everything is immersed in water. And as the water keeps changing 24 hours a day, it gives your body different information, and the body stores the information in the water and modulate the water, the DNA, and affects all the energetic information exchanges in the body, which are essential for function. That's why the water is so important. Obviously, water is affected by natural wave, but let me demonstrate another evidence of the effect of energy as well as consciousness on water. You see, as we saw in the case of snowflakes, you can freeze water and find out what is the crystallization. So Masaru Emoto, which you probably all heard about him, crystallized water by freezing it. And this is very interesting because it's very telling. So when he froze natural water from a spring, as you can see it in the slide, the crystallization was wonderful and symmetrical. When he took water from a polluted area, non-polluted lake, the crystallization was ugly and unsymmetrical. When he took polluted water on the right, and then a group of people prayed to the water, the same water crystallized in a beautiful snowflake-like symmetrical shape. That's an example how consciousness or intention can change water. And that actually will explain why prayer is effective, because you actually can transmit the information to others, even remotely. And now I'll give you another example that we're looking at the effect of consciousness. Actually, everything in your body transmits information and receives. The DNA not only transmits, but receives information. And let me give an example for research done actually by the military. What they did, they looked at the white cell DNA, and they took people and showed them scary movies or movies that brought very negative emotions. And then they took the DNA next room and looked at the microscope at the white cells. The DNA, when they watched stressful movies, the DNA contracted. When they were watching wonderful, happy, funny films, the DNA was expanding. Now, they took the blood and took it 300 miles away. The reaction of the blood, of the DNA, was immediate. And that's, again, another example of phenomena where somebody happens to somebody close to you, family or somebody you really love, and you know that something happened, or you feel what they're feeling or know what happened, because you're in resonance with their DNA, which you can tune. And that's actually example that this type of transmission goes beyond time and space. So that's other example of consciousness affecting your body and your ability of the body to receive information. Another example here is music. We know that classical music is healing. You see what Beethoven Pastoral Symphony will do to water, and then heavy metal. Heavy metal is quite destructive, and if you play heavy metal music to plant for several days continuously, it will die. And we know what it does to kids that go to a heavy metal music concert. They get rowdy, violent, and so forth. And this is another example of effect of consciousness. If you tell the water, you make me sick, I'll kill you, you have this strange, asymmetrical, ugly crystallization. If you tell the water, or you send the water love and appreciation, you have beautiful crystallization. And that's another demonstration that everything is energy. Even the letters that you write are energy. Here what happened when they wrote Adolf Hitler on water and Mother Teresa in another bottle, and then they froze in the bottle, you see the big difference. Adolf Hitler is very ugly, and Mother Teresa is nice and harmonious. That's another example of water from Lourdes, France. A lot of clinically proven so-called miraculous or unexplained spontaneous healing occurred, and here distilled water, which is basically dead, has no information. And it's important to be aware of it because many people drink distilled water and think it's good for them. It's actually demineralizes your body, and it's very harmful. One more example before we summarize, and that's very, very telling. Talk about artificial waves. So see here from Emoto's book, Messages from Water. See what happened to water on the left before television, after television, before computer, after computer, before cell phone, after exposure to cell phone, before microwave, after microwave. So see what happened to the water after microwave. And it's interesting that the pattern is kind of the same. And obviously when the water in your body becomes like that, it would be the equivalent of corrupted files and viruses. It doesn't allow your body to work properly, which eventually will affect your body. It can be slow, it could be fast, but it will affect you. If you drink water within 10 minutes of being cooked or heated in microwave, it actually cooks your whole solar plexus energetically, damages your solar plexus because the water still irradiates. Same thing, by the way, never use microwave water to heat your body because the pollution will be transmitted by water. It also reminds me of a clinical case that I have. One of the reasons you don't want to sleep on waterbed is because you have to heat it even periodically, and the heat, the electrical heat, creates misinformation, as you see here. Water irradiates information. So I had a patient that had severe prostate problem, and he told me that he slept on waterbed. So I explained why it's not good. He said, oh, you know, when I don't sleep at home, I have no prostate problem, but when I sleep on my waterbed, I always have problems. Water is the most important element for your health and life. You can live without food, but you cannot live too long without water. So water is information system. When it comes from the sky, rain form, it takes what we call electrical information or young information. Drinking water from the rain is not good. It's good for the plants, not for you. The cultures in the Middle East where there's no rain in the summer, there's no rain at all, they actually kept the water in cisterns underground for a few years before they drank it. They knew better. When the water comes into the ground, it takes magnetic information or yin information from Earth and colloidal minerals. Minerals in colloidal form, which are energetically active in our body, are very important. So when water comes to the surface as a spring or artesian well, that's the best water energetically for our body. Of course, because it's local information, it's better to drink water from your own locale. And you can have occasionally water very, very deep that could be from tens of thousands of years ago, and that's old information. Or, for example, if you drink glacier water from water that was crystallized hundreds or thousands of years ago, which is not good for this time and age because the universe changes and your body adapts to the universe and all the energy around us, and everything changes. As they say, the only constant in the universe is change.